Today's show focuses on the Game of Thrones battle that's emerged between Tesla, CATL, LG, and supposedly the dry erase technology that's being developed by Elon and Tesla to make their own batteries. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. So we had also want to thank our Patreon supporters as well as those of you who like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated. So something interesting happened this week, which is along with manufacturing opening up, the CFO of Panasonic announced that up until March, the Gigafactory in Reno was actually profitable. So this is kind of big news. There have been a lot of problems between Sony or Panasonic and Tesla over the last couple of years because Panasonic was concerned about profitability and they weren't getting a lot of cooperation from Tesla in that process. So our goal in this show is kind of review that working relationship currently, what the implications are of the reopening of the Gigafactory, and then what Tesla's goals are in China, and then kind of follow up with some discussions of Tesla's new battery, as well as taking a look at kind of what are we facing going forward, given, if you will, the combatants for the throne of Tesla's batteries, short and long term. So to give you some background, what's been happening is that in business there's a concept called fixed versus variable costs. So when it comes to the production of batteries, Elon has been sort of battling with Panasonic over the last couple of years for a sufficient battery supply so he could boost the amount of production. The problem that's been going on is that while the two companies operate in the same building and it's implied that, yes, they're very close partners there, it's really the case that Panasonic actually builds the cells and then sells them to Tesla through a door. And so Tesla's not involved in the production of the cells, but they are involved in taking those cells and turning them into battery packs and then installing them in cars. So a problem/battle has emerged between the two partners, which is that Panasonic, as of a year ago, was reticent to build to the full capacity of the plant because that means they would have to spend more on fixed costs without a confirmation that there's enough demand from Tesla to meet the number of batteries that would be produced at that new level. And so the problem was once Panasonic pushed up to that productive capacity, if Tesla couldn't take those cells, Tesla had the right to simply not take the cells because they weren't selling enough vehicles. So we kind of got the first hint this past fall or in November from the head of the facilities in Reno for the Panasonic side that given the Model Y demand numbers they were seeing, it was a clear sign that Tesla was doing well and there's a valid reason for them to expand to the full 35 gigawatt hour capabilities. And so that's kind of been followed up on with Mr. Yukeda, the CFO of Panasonic, saying, yes, we're seeing a strong order book, and therefore we can now have discussions about expanding capacity because we don't want to overexpand and get stuck with inventory that Tesla's not going to pay for. So now we're in an interesting situation where usually Tesla's tight-lipped on what's going on. We actually heard the CFO of Tesla come out and say our order book is as strong as it's ever been. And so he really didn't imply what that meant. Did that mean that with all the orders for the Cybertruck, which isn't being built yet and the factory doesn't exist yet, we're in a good demand situation? the suggestion coming from Panasonic is that the demand situation, without considering the Cybertruck, is strong enough to validate them expanding their productive capacity from 35 gigawatt hours to potentially 54 gigawatt hours, a 50% increase. And according to Tesla and Elon, there's actually no need to expand the footprint of the building. They can simply add more lines and reconfigure in order to get those larger, that larger production out. A footnote on everything going on Gigafactory, I was very surprised by that came out of the discussions or reveal on profitability by Panasonic is the fact that they were saying that until CATL gets going in China, they're actually producing the batteries for the Shanghai Gigafactory. I kind of found this strange given the fact that Reno shut down for a while, and I guess theoretically they could have been sending the cells they were making over to China all along. But I was kind of very surprised to hear this. CATL did indicate that their July 1 was the target date for the start of their delivery of cells to the Shanghai factory. And so, there's a bunch of questions that are lurking here that are valid to ask. The next thing that sort of pops up here is let's move over to sort of what's going on with CATL as we look at the Game of Thrones process. So the reason CATL came into play is that Panasonic elected to no longer provide cells to the Buffalo facility and declined Tesla's offer to take on selling cells to the Shanghai plant. And so this was a very strange, interesting move that was made because clearly they have a working relationship already. Panasonic would have had the freedom to produce more in Reno and ship over if it needed to, or produce more in China and ship back to Reno. There are all kinds of flexibilities that Panasonic would have had, but they elected to decline this work. Now, the argument we would make for why they declined is that they're about to start a partnership with Toyota, and that partnership results in Toyota trying to build some very large battery facilities with the help of Panasonic. And even though Panasonic and Tesla have a good working relationship, their relationship with Toyota precedes by 20 years the working relationship they've had with Tesla. And they've actually been producing cells for Toyota vehicles long before the relationship with Tesla started. So it makes sense for them to sort of turn down the China business. But this introduces a very interesting problem, and why we thought the Game of Thrones is how this is looking. And that is that Elon has stated that every price point of input is 50% of what it is in the United States once the factory in Shanghai is going properly. The biggest line item in cost is the batteries. So we were surprised to hear this because the implication is that CATL is able to come in at 50% of the costs. And if that's the case, I think that's phenomenal, that's mind-blowing, and it's good for Tesla to have that. But the weird question that pops up is, if in fact it's half the cost to build a vehicle in Shanghai, and they've got a large enough facility to meet the needs of the Chinese, why wouldn't Tesla simply choose to ship those vehicles to other parts of the world? Because the profit margins, in theory, would be double what they are for vehicles in the United States. So this is a very interesting question. So in the short term, the answer to this is that CATL/LG, we think it's just CATL they have in that factory because LG is a Korean company and the Chinese are trying to keep the jobs at home. So we're in a very interesting sort of how the data points are moving. And so what we see happening over the next year or two is the potential for CATL/Panasonic to go to battle to see who gets to supply batteries to vehicles in the United States, who gets to supply batteries to the vehicles in China. Clearly, it's cheaper to have CATL deliver them in China, but will Tesla be incentivized to go ahead and start producing batteries in that facility with the help of CATL that might go into Tesla vehicles in the United States? Now, you may recall that we do have the Semi coming out as well as the Roadster, and then soon after that, in theory, we have the Cybertruck coming, all of which are going to require batteries. The current solution that Tesla has been using when it comes to batteries, if Panasonic cannot produce them for things like their Powerwall, as well as stationary storage for large orders, is to go to Samsung and buy their batteries, because they're not perhaps as good as the lithium ion, but you don't have the weight requirements that are associated with a moving battery when it comes to stationary storage. So, bottom line is, it is logical for them to make this choice to bounce to Samsung if Panasonic doesn't want to produce all those cells or can't produce all those cells. So now you see why we define this as kind of a Game of Thrones for Tesla dominance in terms of production. So the final element of the combatants for the throne of Tesla is the fact that Elon has been coy about what's going to be covered during the current battery day. And so one of the suggestions that's been made is there's actually a new battery line that's being built in Fremont that will provide at least a portion of the batteries Tesla needs to go into its cars. And the theory is that because they bought Maxwell, the thought was that what they're going to be able to do is simply shift some of their vehicles over to these new cells and therefore get better costs and all these other better elements. So we'll stay tuned to see if in fact the battery day happens next month and how that works out. But what's implied here is you now have an interesting battle that's brewing between Tesla's own productive capacity, what's happening in Reno, and what's happening with Shanghai with the production by CATL. One of the questions that comes up, because the main two battlers will be CATL and Panasonic, was how is it possible, given how good Panasonic is with battery density, etc., that CATL can deliver in the way that they're describing? And the one advantage that I see that they have is the Chinese government supplying capital to that facility allows them to have a cost advantage from that angle. And there are a number of core elements of the battery that come from mining within China. So there is the possibility that there are a lot of cost elements going into the cells produced by CATL that are sourced within China that gives them ways to find a competitive advantage over other options that are out there for those that are not producing within China. So as you can see, there's a lot of different elements for how this whole battle is setting up. And I'm fascinated, amazed, because while other manufacturers, be it GM or Daimler and others, are trying to find a way to just get a building up so they're not competing with each other to get LG cells, Tesla has the embarrassment of riches of having multiple companies battle for the business that they're providing. The one last piece that we wanted to take a look at in this whole sort of battle between the companies is the fact that we're kind of entering the zone now where, because of what's called network effects, meaning that consumers are getting used to Tesla being the standard when it comes to electric vehicles, and there's still time for large firms to get in and make a dent in that business before Tesla takes it over. We're quickly headed to a time where it's possible that Tesla will grow large enough that it's largely meeting a lot of the demand for electric vehicles. And if they can get prices down further, as they've discussed, you could end up with a situation where, somewhat current to today, the large competing OEMs are stuck in a relatively small piece of the pie, and we start to move towards what we see now, where you have the iPhone and the Android, and there's not a lot that competing entities that can offer to force Apple or in this case Google out of the slot. And so it's kind of hard to believe that it might happen, but it really looks as though it's going to be Tesla, VW, maybe Mercedes, and then the GMs and Fords of the world kind of go to the wayside because they literally, like in the case of Ford, don't have the capital to start building the battery capacity that they need in order to try to be competitive in this space. So not only is there a Game of Thrones process to determine who's going to be able to supply and willing and able to supply batteries when it comes to Tesla, but there's also a question mark of will some of the smaller players be able to stay in business as we move to the electric space. So, our suggestion is to stay tuned. We're eager to find out what happens and why, and we're hopeful that a lot of people keep their jobs, and some of these big firms that have chosen not to participate are able to figure out a way to stick around, but I wouldn't guarantee it. So overall, we're pleased with everything that we're seeing right now. In particular, it's clear that Tesla's doing well from a lot of fronts. Stock isn't moving much because they haven't put numbers on it, and we're waiting to see if they have enough productive capacity to make it to the Q2 numbers. They need to join the S&P. I'm pretty confident Elon will figure this out. We're also pleased to get access to a confirmation that demand is strong from Tesla for batteries, which implies that they have a good book of business that they're filling as they distribute vehicles. So I just think that there's a lot of sort of signs that we can derive from this, where Tesla usually does not reveal information, that allows us to sort of conclude that, hey, the company's doing well, they're making money, they're building a lot of vehicles, there's a nice book of orders out there. So, there's a lot of good things that are going on for Tesla. And then as you look out on the horizons, there's the German Gigafactory and all these new vehicles that are scheduled to happen. So, bottom line is that, a lot of data points to consider. We look forward to keeping you up to date on it. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because if CATL can deliver the batteries at the prices they're describing, there won't be a need for Panasonic to expand production, because Tesla could simply buy from the cheaper battery source to fuel future products. So again, we'll keep you posted on how all this works out, and we look forward to your comments on this. Just a reminder, 25 leg lifts a day is a good deal in terms of expanding your, making sure you don't have knee issues. I'm about to do mine now with a 5-pound weight. Also wanted to encourage you, no fried foods more than once a week. Just a reminder, a power walk wouldn't be a bad idea, but some weightlifting could also help with bone density. Also wanted to note that the 5-2 or some other diet in that fasting zone could also be helpful in terms of mental faculty management. So, any rate, I want to again thank you for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe. Tschüss German, au revoir French, lehit road, hibku khoda hafez Farsi. And in Jamaica we say, enough respect, walk good. Hey do, Swedish, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, and ni hao ma, hello in Chinese. We want to thank you again for joining us. Have a great day. Bye for now.